This is Agriculture Today, and I'm Shelby Varner with the K-State Radio Network. Roger McEowen, K-State and Washburn law professor, starts off today's show by highlighting 3 developments that took place in 2024 for agricultural law and taxation. Continuing the show is Kansas 4-H's Beth Hinshaw and Dona Ratliff as they talk about Kansas 4-H Days and Citizenship in Action, respectively. Part of the Beef Cattle Institute's Cattle Chat podcast with Brad White, Dustin Pendell, Bob Larson, Phillip Lancaster, and special guest Ty Lawrence in today's show as they converse about the difference between maximization and optimization for cattle. That and more is coming up ahead. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we start our Wednesday show talking with Roger McEowen, K-State and Washburn law professor, as his not quite top 10 things for 2024. Roger, thanks for joining us today.
Good to be with you, Shelby.
Roger, 3 things to talk about today that almost made your top 10 when it comes to agricultural law and taxation. And the first one involving climate smart, and what is it?
Well, this involves USDA's push for climate-smart ag practices, and that was a big issue in 2024, just off of my top 10 list, which we'll eventually get to in coming weeks, but real close. But as of the end of 2024, USDA had poured at least $3 billion tax dollars into getting farmers to enroll in projects such as those designed to reduce methane emissions and sequester carbon. And that's all under the rubric of USDA's Partnership for Climate Smart Commodities Projects. And it really dovetails in and flows from the Security and Exchange Commission's plans that were announced in 2022, which would force all publicly traded companies to submit an environmental social governance report, those ESG reports. And so what USDA is doing is trying to force farmers into basically ESG-type compliance. Well, 5 months later, after the SEC plans were announced, the USDA's project was announced. And with funding comes a loss of freedom, because what's happening here is that USDA is trying to manipulate certain behavior and reward it with certain types of compensation.
And is the USDA working with Colorado State University on something for this Climate Smart as well?
Well, they're working with numerous universities. Certain universities have received funding for this, and I'm sure this is something we're going to see in the near future once DOJ gets into USDA. Of course, they're dealing with other agencies right now, but USDA will be in the line to face an audit by DOJ. But a number of universities have received funding. Some of the big ag processing firms have received funding, and even some of the ag media to promote it have received funding.
What's happened so far in 2025 with it?
Well, we're going to see where this goes. I think probably a lot of people that are listening are familiar or have heard in the past couple of years as to what's happened over in the Netherlands and Denmark and Poland and other places in Europe of a revolt basically by farmers with new environmental restrictions that have been placed on their farms. Well, this is kind of the counterpart over here as to what USDA is trying to do. In mid-January of this year, the USDA is kind of related to this. They did put out an interim rule called Technical Guidelines for Climate-Smart Agricultural Crops Used as Biofuel Feedstocks. And that's where we're now seeing the rules for quantifying, reporting, and verifying greenhouse gases. Now, what comes with that and what farmers will know is once it's measured, it'll be regulated. And that's where the rub is with respect to this. So it's going to be interesting to see as we go forward. We've got a new Secretary of Agriculture. We're going to have completely new bureaucracy. We've got a new mindset at the White House and then down through the USDA. Are they going to go forward with this? Are they going to finalize those rules or just let it lay there and die on the vine? Don't know. But we'll have to see what happens with respect to this. It's just kind of a new mindset that we've got coming in right now in USDA. So we'll see where all this climate stuff goes. I would say that the funding for this largely has come out of the Inflation Reduction Act of 2022, and a lot of that funding is going to get that hasn't been dispersed is going to get pulled.
So something that really affects farmers, but then also agricultural companies?
Well, it could, indeed, because they are the ones that get into these contracts with farmers, and farmers are certifying that they're growing crops in a certain way to get, whether it might be tax credits or whatever the case might be. They're trying to certify that, yes, I produce this grain in a certain manner. It would qualify me for some benefit over here. Our current marketing systems are not set up that way. We don't segregate grain based on the way that it was produced. So it's kind of a really onerous system to manage and regulate. And I wonder whether the new administration is going to carry through with this. Now, some farmers listening have heard about Section 45Z of the Internal Revenue Code. What I'm talking about here does not implement Section 45Z. We're going to have the Treasury write rules for how you qualify for the clean fuel production credit under Section 45Z, how a biofuel plant or an ethanol plant would qualify and then be able to kick some of that back to farmers. This has nothing to do with 45Z. That's totally separate, so people need to keep that in mind. That's another code section that may not really take effect under the new administration. So a lot of things up in the air right now on this.
Something else that almost made your list for agricultural law in 2024, PFAs, and what was all the talk and work around that?
Well, PFAs are a widely used, long-lasting chemical that have components that break down slowly over time, and they've been used since the 1940s, and it's in water, and it's in air, and it's in soil, not just in the United States, but all over the globe, and they're used for commercial and industrial products, and there are studies out there that have shown that exposure to PFAs may be linked to harmful health effects in both humans as well as animals. And really, Shelby, it's an instance where you have over 15,000 chemicals that are associated with various cancers and other health problems that PFAs are a group of. So it's pretty widespread, and it's everywhere in our environment. And we had a couple of significant cases in 2024. This is why it made my almost top 10 list. Is because a couple of major farming operations were completely shut down and bankrupted because the state came in and tested soil and tested samples of livestock products that they had sold their livestock, and then, of course, they are slaughtered and you have the meat that's produced, and they tested those, and they tested positive in the soil and in the meat for the presence of PFAs. So the state came in, these states happened to be testing for this, and was able to shut those operations down, saying you can't grow crops, you can't sell livestock for meat products from your farm. Well, then there goes your income stream. And you've got to remediate your soil at an extreme cost. And the way the farmers got into this problem is because a lot of farmers, in an attempt to save on fertilizer costs, will use biosolids. And so they'll go buy biosolids from a plant that has biosolids produced from a byproduct of their process, and they'll apply it to their land. Well, the lawsuits were back against the suppliers of the biosolids. So the legal system is trying to sort out who's responsible for what here, and these are multi-million-dollar cases. So we'll see where this goes going forward, and some states have taken preemptive action on this. Maine has banned land application of biosolids and set up a fund for impacted farmers, and other states are looking into providing compensation for disaffected farmers. Now, as of right now, Kansas does not test for the presence of PFAs. If they were to start doing that at some point in the future, then we're going to have some farming operations that need to be concerned about that. So we'll see where this goes. That's a big issue. I think it'll probably still be on the table when we talk about this in a year from now.
And something else operations need to keep an eye on this year, EID mandate for the cattle industry.
Yeah, mandatory EID, it took effect November 5. It's being challenged in the courts. In federal district court in South Dakota, the lawsuit against mandatory animal ID has been filed. Currently, the court has kicked that thing back, basically saying that the plaintiffs, the challengers, didn't have standing to sue because they couldn't show damages. So they are amending their complaint as we speak right now, as we record this, to include ranchers that had to expend funds to buy the mandatory type identification tags. And so that case, they'll refile that. That case will go forward, I would anticipate.
What livestock are required to have these EIDs?
This is cattle and bison. And the reason that this is so contentious in the livestock industry is this goes back 30 years when we got into the WTO. And as part of the WTO, there was a push to trace livestock disease. And so there were initial systems. The EIS program was established in the United States. That went by the wayside. That was replaced by a different system starting in 2010. And then in 2013, in regulations, USDA promised cattlemen that they could have flexibility in how they complied. Well, what happened in the most recent rules is that flexibility was completely removed, and they went to mandatory ID. You don't have any flexibility on how you can comply with the rules, and that's what has upset a lot of cattlemen in this, particularly because of the cost associated with it. They've taken the lower cost options off the table for cattlemen, and that's why you have the lawsuit. And this affects relatively smaller operations more so than it does larger operations. So we'll see what happens with this. There are some other issues I could see from a legal standpoint with the regulations themselves. This governs cattle that travel in interstate commerce. Well, you don't have to have the mandatory ID if your cattle don't cross state lines. And so that makes a difference for us in Kansas because we have packing plants. And so we have some producers that necessarily wouldn't have to comply because their cattle never cross state lines. So if they're born, bred, raised in Kansas and go to a packing plant in Kansas, it's not a problem. But let's say I'm in Ohio, there are no packing plants in Ohio. So those will cross state lines. So the impact of the cost of this is what I'm getting at here. It's disproportionate. And that's going to be one of the legal issues that the courts will have to settle out on this. Again, going forward, it's interesting to see what's going to happen with administrative agencies, including USDA, and this may be one of these that doesn't get fully implemented. I don't know. It's already in effect. We'll have to see what the auditors of the administrative agencies come up with.
Roger, I appreciate you taking the time to join us today.
Thank you, Shelby.
That was K-State and Washburn law professor Roger McEowen. If you'd like to read more on these topics, I will link his blog article, The Not Quite Top 10, in today's show notes on agtoday.net. We're cutting to a short break now on Agriculture Today, but we'll be right back. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we continue our show talking about some upcoming 4-H events with 4-H Youth Development Specialist Beth Hinshaw and Program Coordinator in charge of 4-H State Events, Dona Ratliff. Beth, Dona, thank you both so much for taking the time to join us today.
Thank you for having us.
Beth, wanting to first begin talking about 4-H days with Kansas 4-H, and what are 4-H days?
So 4-H days happen all across the state. Every local extension unit has them. And it's an opportunity for young people to use their communication skills. That might be talks, demonstrations, project talks, public speaking. A lot of local units also have opportunities for readings or maybe a play that your local 4-H club does, or a dance, any of those kinds of things.
Why is this something that you see as important to Kansas 4-Hers?
You know, Kansas 4-H has more than 100-year history of working with young people with communication skills. And through 4-H, those thousands of youth have learned those skills to clearly organize information, present ideas and instructions through project talks, demonstrations, illustrated talks, public speaking. You know, those are all skills that are really important as you go through life.
Can you provide us some examples of what you mean by those different presentations?
When we think about the opportunities that young people have, a lot of times kids will start with a project talk. And a project talk is a simple public presentation where they tell about their project. Another popular type of presentation is a demonstration. And a demonstration is where a young person actually demonstrates something. So maybe they demonstrate how to make a book cover, or they demonstrate how to make cinnamon rolls. An illustrated talk is another option. And that's where they tell how to do something. So they might have pieces there. They're not necessarily going to show it, but they're going to tell people how something goes together or happens. And then we also have opportunities for kids to do public speaking. Usually those speeches are about informing people about something.
And how do these communication skills that are hopefully being developed with 4-H days really play into life skills as well?
Giving presentations in 4-H is going to teach kids many life skills. And some of those are like how to organize information in a logical manner, how to find information and research a subject, how to express ideas clearly and convincingly, you know, when we think about this public speaking. And I would say we want to be convincing also when we're doing a demonstration or an illustrated talk, like we're showing you or we're telling you how to do this. You can do it too. They also learn about preparing visual aids that are going to help them support a presentation. And, you know, when kids give a presentation, maybe at their local 4-H club, they might just get the feedback of applause or people talking to them afterward or asking a question. But when we go to 4-H Day, we actually get to sit down with a judge afterward where they can go through our presentation with us and tell us what we did really well and some things that we might want to think about for next time. So it's part of that experiential learning process in Kansas 4-H where we do something, we reflect on it, and then we apply it for the next time. And a couple other things, it also helps us listen to the opinions of others and accept that feedback. It teaches us about teaching others, how to manage our time, and also kind of how to manage stress. You know, everybody has that little, before they get up in front of a group of people, but it's important to get past that.
What age of 4-H'er is 4-H Days for?
So typically, you know, our 4-H ages are 7 to 18. So you would see young people 7 to 18 doing presentations at 4-H Day. It's possible that some local units also have an opportunity for our Clover Buds, who are ages 5 and 6, to do something in a non-competitive way. I've seen some things where groups will do show and tell with younger kids to just get them started with that. What's it like to speak to others?
If people want to find out more information about 4-H Days, what's your recommendation for them?
So I think it's really important to check out your local extension unit webpage or Facebook page and see when 4-H Day is scheduled for. You know, sometimes 4-H Day, you know, the parents are there, the grandparents are there. There are wonderful things that, you know, you would love to see young people doing in your community. And that's what I always like to remind people is sometimes we hear all the bad things that young people do. If you go to 4-H Day, you're going to come away just really feeling excited and impressed about the skills young people have for the future.
One of those skills you mentioned is communication skills, and one place where 4-H'ers might be able to practice those is the 4-H Citizenship in Action Educational Experience. And Donna, what is that?
Yes, Citizenship in Action event happens over President's Day weekend, so February 16th and 17th. And this is a unique 4-H opportunity for our older youth, ages 13 to 18, to be able to use those communication skills that they've been working on. And they get to use them in a way where they can come down to the state capitol and use their skills to be able to deliberate a bill. This year's bill we have chosen is House Bill 2103. And the unique quality in this bill this year is they are talking about the possibility of making FFA and 4-H events and other ag-related educational events excused absences from school. And so our youth will be given the bill information. The committee has done some work prior to the event, gone out and talked to constituents to learn what the pros and the cons to this type of legislation would be. And so when we get together then at the event, they will have people who learn to take sides. And when we go down to the Capitol then on Sunday night, we have the unique opportunity to be on the Senate and House floors and deliberate the bill. And so the youth are then given the microphone and they get to voice their opinions as to why they believe this is a positive action, or maybe they are going to be the voice of someone who does not support it. But they are given the opportunity that they get to actually be in professional attire, learn how to be in the environment of our Senate and House chambers and the proper way to introduce questions or anything like that, address the speaker. So it's really a wonderful opportunity to learn that process. But they also have the opportunity then the next day to meet with their legislators and talk to them about what it is to make a difference in decision making at the legislative level, whether it be something for their community, something for their state, or maybe higher up eventually. So it's a very wonderful opportunity for these youth ages 13 to 18. And we have about 250 youth and adults that will come together. And we are really excited to have it. We are capped this year for attendees numbers, so that's exciting. And it will be a fun and educational event.
And something else really cool about Citizenship in Action is really the 4-Hers that have been elected into state council who help put it on and encourage other 4-Hers to be a part of this experience.
That is right. Our youth council, and Beth, you can talk a little bit more on that side of it, but our youth council help actually lead the event. So they will be the Speaker of the House or the Speaker of the Senate and introduce the legislation. And it's really exciting because they also have invited legislators to come down and see the deliberation process. And they actually kind of address how you properly introduce things or ask questions. Or it's really exciting to see that because our legislators get excited to see our youth being involved.
Beth, can you tell us a little bit about what is State Youth Council?
Our State Youth Council is a group. It can be anywhere to 20 to 24 young people each year who are elected and selected to represent the state of Kansas. That happens at our Youth Leadership Forum in November. And the two major things that they work with are the Kansas Youth Leadership Forum and then 4-H Citizenship in Action. And one of the really wonderful things about 4-H Citizenship in Action is that was born into happening because of a youth council. We had a youth council group go to Topeka and they were like, we could make this something educational. So we're very serious about a youth and adult partnership and doing things that young people are interested in and spark their interest. And so it's really been wonderful to watch 4-H Citizenship in Action grow into being and continue to grow and evolve to teach kids these life skills.
If people want to find out more information about this experience or other things related to Kansas 4-H, how can they do that?
You are welcome to check out our website, kansas4h.org. Otherwise, you are welcome to always call our office here in Manhattan on Kansas State University, 785-532-5800. And we would be happy to guide you in finding more information. You can also contact your local extension offices. They will definitely guide you in activities that are suited towards your youth's ages.
Beth, Donna, I appreciate you both taking the time to join us today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That was Program Coordinator in charge of 4-H State Events, Dona Ratliff, and 4-H Youth Development Specialist, Beth Hinshaw. I will link the resources that Donna and Beth mentioned in today's show notes on agtoday.net. We're cutting to a short break now, but stick around because we have more for you up ahead. You're tuned in to Agriculture Today, and we conclude our Wednesday show with part of the Beef Cattle Institute's Cattle Chat podcast with Brad White, Dustin Pendell, Phillip Lancaster, Bob Larson, and special guest Ty Lawrence.
It's easy to think about maximizing. I'm going to maximize carcass size. I'm going to maximize cow size because I'm selling pounds at the end of the day. But there is a trade-off there, and I may want to think about optimization. So maybe distinguish those two concepts for us, Dustin, and then we'll talk about fed cattle and mature cows.
Yep. So I think maximum is pretty straightforward, right? It's the greatest amount, the biggest cow size or the biggest carcass size that weighs the most. Optimum, it's going to be the most favorable amount or favorable size. So it does, those in theory could be the same thing, I guess, right? Maximum carcass or cow could be the optimal. But it isn't necessarily the case. And I think there's a lot of things that go into this optimal decision framework. And at the end of the day, it's going to be up to the decision maker to determine what is optimal.
So, Ty, on the carcass size of fed cattle or the live weight of fed cattle, which is tied to their carcass size, how do you determine which is, should I target maximum or should I target optimal? And what are some of the criteria?
So in targeting the animal, I'm going to recommend that you look at the carcass gain that you're having every day. Now, this is obviously something you're going to have to estimate, but there's reliable models that can get you pretty close. And you need to have the animal sold before you're putting more feed and yardage, fundamental value into it every day than it's gaining. The optimum part of that is you have to get the animal sold, so it can't be heavier than your beef processing partner is willing to take.
And the trade-off there, because we know the efficiency changes a little bit as those cattle grow, but you're looking at it on carcass weight of gain. We don't have some of those same tools on mature cows because we look at weaning weight. But Bob and Phillip, you guys have actually done some research in this area. What do you think, maximal versus optimal?
Well, two things. Costs, so think about pasture grazing costs and supplemental feed costs. And also think about the reproductive efficiency, because every cow that I maintain for a year that doesn't get pregnant, doesn't bring me value, is a drain on the system. So I definitely need an optimum and pretty high reproductive efficiency. Now, that doesn't necessarily go down with larger cows, but the feed resources to maintain them does go up. And so that's where we start seeing it on the cow-calf side is in the United States, a great deal of our cattle herd is in a part of the country where there's 20 inches or less of rainfall a year. And so there's constrictions on the forage quantity and quality available. And so we have some environmental constraints. That being said, you go back to we can supplement cows on pasture. So you could supplement a large cow that could not maintain herself on pasture alone with harvested feed, a lot of times byproduct feeds at this day and age. Then it's up to Dustin to come up with a spreadsheet that goes, well, because typically the cost of those supplemental days are higher than grazing days, but we're making a bigger. So I'm going to just mess it up and then let Phillip clean it up. But basically saying I got to keep my reproductive efficiency high. I have to look at the trade-off between grazing days and supplemental costs and what those are currently. I would say currently it's still a big but not huge cow. But that might change in the future.
I think when you look at it from an industry-wide perspective, larger frame animals are more profitable. We're getting more beef per animal, per maintenance cost. And that's the big thing. So on the cow-calf side, I've got a lot more feed and cost that goes into just maintaining the animals than I do on the feedlot side. And so from an industry-wide perspective, I think that the bigger we can get the calves, then we dilute that maintenance out. But then on the cow-calf side, if I'm just selling at weaning, it's hard to get enough pounds to dilute the maintenance cost out of a larger cow. And so that optimum versus maximum thing there from an industry's perspective versus just the cow-calf side of things is hard to balance.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think as you guys described it, there are some differences there, and you may want to target optimum more on the cow-calf side, and on the feedlot side, you may lean more towards maximizing, as Ty mentioned.
That's all we have for you today on Agriculture Today, but we'll be back with more for you tomorrow.